Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com, the Deer Hunter video series, which I'm winding down this week, Monday, Valentine's Day, February 14th. So here to do, it's known as, I got my copies, Act 4, Rebirth and Reprise. So I have two copies on CD, both the Digipacks. I don't know if it was issued as a jewel case. It probably was. And then I have the vinyl. So why don't I just go through that? I mean, it was released officially, at least it says here, September 4th, 2015. Yeah, it was 2000 Unequal Vision. I haven't been talking about record label. I didn't do that from, well, I talked about EMI a little bit from Marillion, but Kevin's PRS and stuff like that. Kevin Gilbert. But, yeah, Act 5, Rebirth and Act 4, Rebirth and Reprise. Following the release of, well, Migrant in 2013 and Amore and Attrition, and he did, I think, the live album for the Color Spectrum also. The Color Spectrum 2011, you know, just the stuff I just talked about. And Amore and Attrition, I think, was 2014, the symphony that he composed. So here's the book. You know, I mean, the track list, probably didn't show that. There's your track list. It's, whatever, 15 songs. This one, I think, took a little bit of a beating. You can see, like, marks on it. And this one, I don't know if I bought two of them right away, but yeah, there's, actually, that's interesting. You look at this one's like, I don't know if it's black or, I know there's probably a message in here too. No, I guess not. But this one's, that's what I screwed this up. I put the wrong CD in the jewel case. Interesting, because I used to have these in my car. Yeah, I was thinking that, you know, why would the CDs look that different? But I have two copies of it, and that would probably suggest that one of my copies is in a different jewel case. Maybe my Act 5 one. So this is Act 4, Rebirth and Reprise. The booklet, I believe, is still the same as the one I just showed on this one. Sometimes when you don't look at your stuff, you know, yeah, the style of the Act series, you know. And then here's the vinyl, which is, I guess, more significant to me at this point. And I'll say this, just off the bat, I think this is my favorite album from the Deer Hunter in terms of artwork. That's not really spoiling my rankings and stuff, isn't impacted, but I enjoy the artwork on this album the most among all their all the Act albums at least. And yeah, pretty much, I like the artwork on the Color Spectrum a lot, but yeah, so I'm not sure if I got the vinyl on September 4th, probably September 4th, yeah. That's an anniversary of my work anniversary. September has a lot of anniversaries. That's one side is black, I guess. Or no, again, it's the lighting in here. It's just like this green, kind of swamp green. So I'll say that, so I need to get a few things off the bat about this record, but that's the first half of it that has, you know, waves and stuff like that, and this old haunt. Let's see here. The second half of it, you know, which, you know, none of the Act albums, other than the first one really, it's got an insert too, are short records. I mean, you know, the Deer Hunter doesn't tend to do things short, like a lot of progressive rock bands. Oh, the credits, I think the lineup was pretty close to, you know, other than, you know, Gavin Castleton, who joined, who might have been on Act 5. I can't remember, but, and of course he was with the band for a number of years and he left the band last year. But yeah, this is, I guess you could in some ways say this is the classic lineup, even though it's not really that old, of the band, with Casey, of course, Nick and his brother Nick, Rob Parr, former member of As Tall as Lions, but he's been with them a long time. Nick Sausalito on bass, the two Nicks, and then Max Husso on guitar, also, and synthesizers. And then he had his mom actually sing on that Judy Crescenzo too. So anyway, I think probably this one is probably the same color. Final Community Act. The only thing that's kind of a little bit disappointing is the fact that the we don't have the track titles on the record itself. I don't know if there was another pressing that had them, but anyway. So C and D. So there's some stuff about this record. There's a lot to say about this record. So this record was the first. It was like after they did the Color Spectrum and the Migrant, and we knew from the get-go when we first became a fan. He was talking about after he left the Receiver and the Sirens, he was doing the Deer Hunter project, and then the albums. It was Act 1 and Act 2, and then Act 3. He talked about how the plan was to do 6 acts, and of course, after Act 3, he ends up doing the Color Spectrum to get a break from the acts style and everything like that. And then he does Migrant, and then he does a more attrition. So, as a fan, a lot of the fan base, a lot of the fans that love the act records, those first 3 are act records, were kind of not questioning him, but just wanting him to write more on the act. Wanted to get to Act 4 and Act 5, and then Act 6 at some point. This record is probably known almost as much for kind of not a call or a response or an answer or love letter on Valentine's Day to the fans to do more music with the act style and more on the acts, kind of like Coheed and Cambria and some other bands and artists that have done these series of concept albums that are tied from album to album, but and I definitely noticed there was a large emphasis on both the older fans and then some new fans that came in with this record for various reasons. One being, I think it was that the old fans that maybe like the Color Spectrum got really more their batteries, their interest in the Deer Hunter got re-emphasized and recharged, and then a lot of new people came in. I don't know. Part of it is because younger fans kind of came up, and part of it is just because this album has some of their best songs, some of their most accessible songs, and the production. While the production's not bad on any of the records, even though I don't know if Casey would agree with that, he probably wouldn't, at least on the first couple act records. The production is definitely a step up on this, the mixing, the production, but I think that's largely why I think of this. And then there was a lot of new fans, and then they listened to the older records, and they still lean toward this being the best. This was the most addictive, at least for maybe a 2-3 year period. And I can side with that, although I have a strong connection and sentimental and nostalgic connection with some of the other act records, Act 2 especially. I could still I was of that feeling to an extent. I was happy with the Color Spectrum, I liked Migrant, but I was kind of so when do we get more acts, or what is he going to do next? And this got to be so popular that I don't say I got repulsed by it, but I had a hard time sort of feeling like the way everyone else felt about it. Well, I liked it, and I'll say this. So, track to track, I think of this record for really 3 or 4 songs first and foremost. The biggest being Waves. Waves is a staple, I wouldn't call it a staple pop song, but it's one of the most well-crafted pop rock songs of the last decade. And in some ways, I think it, quote-unquote, trumps, or he topped Red Hands in some way with it. It just is so well-written and so memorable, so inspiring. I get almost turned to tears listening to it now. I just love it. It's so good. Even though it is a pop song of sorts. And then I would say the other 2 or 3, A Night in the Town, which was the first track he released, or Casey released for this record, which it's a sweet, really. It's almost a microcosm of the record in a way, or even of the Deer Hunter's sound. That's why some people say if they've never heard the Deer Hunter, that's a go-to. You want to hear what they sound like? This is a very good example. And it goes through different twists and turns, and of course this is Act 4, in the whole concept, story. There are callbacks to Mustard Gas, little piano, dun 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 dun, and then Bittersweet. I think it's 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. I think it's 1 and 2 from Act 2. So Mustard Gas from Act 3. There's some others, and I don't have time to go over them. At a later time, maybe I'll go more in depth about that. But it's a prog rock tune with a lot of uplifting horn sections and string sections, and just it's very kind of major key, but it's very fast and energetic at points. It's well crafted, even though it is like 10 minutes. In fact, it might be one of the longest songs they did. There were a few songs that went that long on Act 2, but up to this point. Anyway, so then the other one I would just cite as sort of what I think of this album for. Well, the Old Haunt would be another one, and that kind of goes with the beginning of the record, but also King of Swords Reversed, which most of the fans really enjoy that song, and I know Casey, I read one thing, Casey was quoted maybe a year or two after this came out saying that at one point he was either approached or had potential or offers to write some pop songs and go top 40 and everything, and I don't know if he wrote a bunch, and but that song, he didn't want to do it. He felt like he was contemplating when he was going to write the acts right before that, after the more nutrition, like should I do this just from a financial standpoint? It would make things a little more economic security and all that stuff, but he didn't do it. But my feeling is, or my thought is, that song, and I would also say the Squeaky Wheel to an extent, are a product of when he was sort of in that headspace, because it's super catchy and it's super poppy in a lot of ways. There's even that little, like, kind of with the reverb, voiced in do 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 do, which I can't help but not think of Kevin Gilbert, among other musicians like ELO and whoever. Because Casey's he became an ELO fan in the last decade. I know he talked about him many times, but Jeff, why can't I can't think from the Trevor, I can't think of his name. But so the rest of this record, like I was just saying, the Old Haunt, it's got a great energy and a great flow to it. I think from the first, really from the Rebirth, the first track, through A Night in the Town, and I'd even say through King of Swords, the first 11 tracks, there's a flow of the first, like, At the End of the Earth, Remembered, A Night in the Town, especially those first 6. Those first 6 songs are all really strong. Remembered is a ballad, but it still works and it flows really well. And then the Squeaky Wheel, and Is Anybody Here? I always think if there anybody out there from Pink Floyd. I remember people were asking if Casey was a fan of Pink Floyd. Not around this time, but it was more recently. I don't remember I don't know if he is. I'm not sure how much of a fan of Pink Floyd is, but that has nothing to do with it. It's just that song title reminds me of, and maybe some other people's, of the song from The Wall. Is there anybody out there? But and then the Bittersweet 4 and 5, and the Bittersweet 6. I just think, the thing is, when I heard this record and I saw everyone praising it and getting attached to it, I was listening to it a lot back in this fall of 2015 and into 16. I felt like after King of Swords, I think it is, the album kind of lost steam and it didn't have as much cohesiveness and flow. Now, I kind of have warmed up to some of that since. However, I think today, listening to it again, it's the first time I've listened to the whole thing in a few years, I kind of understand, I kind of am even more of a fan of those last 4 tracks. If All Goes Well, The Line, Wait, and Ouroboros. I think the Mars Volta have a song of the same title. But I would say this, Wait is not a song I love, though. It's still, it sounds like something off the Black EP. It's very kind of in your face and dark. Kind of comes out, like, that was my big issue. I remember this now. It kind of just comes out of nowhere. There's not really a transition that fits it that well, whereas The Line is like this really dreamy ballad. So it just, to me, it was like, this is the end of the album, King of Swords, and then these are like the bonus tracks or something. And I know it goes with the concept too, so, but I have less of an issue now than I did when I listened to it for the first time almost like 6.5 years ago or whatever. But the thing is, it's like where this kind of goes within their whole scope and within the story and stuff like that. I mean, it's like the album with the best songs, or with the most really fantastic and memorable songs, but at the same time, it's in some ways maybe the least cohesive album of the acts, and I'll go over this when I do my rankings and stuff, where this falls and stuff, obviously, but it's one of these albums that it's like I want to love it more than I love it. I love it a lot, but I want to love it like it should be the sort of statement face of the Deer Hunter record, and to a lot of fans it is, and to me it's sort of, it's like gone up there, no, there, no, yes it is, no, yes, I think so. It reminds me of a lot of records that are sort of creeping, and I never gave that perfect record to, but then sometimes over some time I kind of just give it and say, like Jellyfish's Spilt Milk at one point I didn't prefer over Belly Button, and one day I just said, screw it, yep, this is it, everyone's right, everyone's been talking about this and they're right, and I'm on the bandwagon. And so Act 4, Rebirth and Reprise, it's one of those records that just, I'm always going to want to listen to it because the production and so many songs are just worth going back to, and I always want to hear them live. So but anyway, so yeah, and the other thing I was going to mention about this, of course, Casey traveled around the country in the U.S. for the Color Spectrum. He also had moved to Boston from L.A. initially when he was in the Receiving Arm Sirens. At this point, I believe, is when he moved to Port Angeles, Washington, which he's been there ever since, I believe. But there's a lot of sort of lyrical things I almost kind of notice in his, maybe in some ways, his personal life, even though it's still in the concept of the story of Hunter, and I was talking about that in the other Act videos a few months ago. I don't follow the story entirely. I haven't read through the lyrics in depth with this album as much as I probably should. But it's, Act 3, Hunter was at war. Act 2 was about his mother, and, we know at some point his mother dies. And so, but the thing is, the whole time frame of where in the whole chronology of time everything is, it's Act 1 through 6, but I don't know if everything takes place at exactly the same time, even within each album. But if we assume that it does, he talks about a girl who's a daughter, but I don't know if it's a love story and someone's daughter on Waves, and he goes to a town, he goes to a city. I know it's some part, maybe in what would be considered like parts of the northeastern part of the United States, but in a different time frame, or wherever, what it would be known as the United States in this parallel world, this world that Casey's created. Bittersweet 4 and 5 obviously deals with, a sermon and like obviously a church. And there's reference, like in Act 2, there's a lot of similarities. Of course, at Bittersweet 4 and 5 and Bittersweet 6, there's Bittersweet 1, 2, and 3. And they talk about the line. I didn't mention that, don't walk too close to the line. I always think there's a Galactic Cowboy song that has a very similar chorus for that, but that chorus is very earwormy, and I think I'd like to see them play the Bittersweets all together. I don't know if they've ever done that in one show. They play all 5 or 6 of them. I would also add one thing is the song "Squeaky Wheel" is catchy, almost as catchy as like Waves and King of Swords reversed. That song, there's a moment or two in it that sounds like Ben Sinister. Now, I'm sure they don't know. Casey, they never brought Ben Sinister on tour with them. I don't know if Casey's ever even heard any of their music, but I totally was reminded of Ben Sinister at one moment in the middle of it. There was a couple other there's references to other parts. There's one song that I can't figure out if it was from this, a blues riff song, or from the Color Spectrum, or maybe Migrant, or it might even be Act 3. That there's a riff at the end of the Earth, I think it is, that sounds an awful lot like, and I spent about half an hour today trying to figure it out, and I haven't figured it out yet, so maybe if I figure it out, I'll bring that up in a later video. But anyway, so that's kind of my, somewhat in-depth, review of Act 4, Rebirth and Reprise, which came out in 2015. What's your take on it? Is it your favorite, the Deer Hunter album? Are you more of an old school, or you prefer the Color Spectrum over it, or whatever? But do you love Waves? Do you love a lot of the catchy and energetic tracks on here, the ballads? I think this is also a kind of not a redefining, but the sound of this in the acts was taking the act sound from the first 3, but he added a lot of things. I think the Color Spectrum, even maybe some of Migrant in the Migration Annex, may have sort of influenced some of the orchestral and more nutrition, the use of the arrangement. I don't know if they used the Awesome Orchestra on this one or was the next one, or both. But while the Deer Hunters music always has used string and horn arrangements, I think it's reflected more. It's a reflection of more of the way they sounded on that symphony he wrote, and then some moments on like act on the Color Spectrum, and this kind of the variety of songs. Like I could not see him writing all these songs during the Act 2 or Act 3 dates. It's just there's a little difference in the aesthetic and the kind of production approach, and it, for better or for worse, I think it's for the better. I think the production is that much better on this record, and that's one reason why. So, but anyway, again, that's my take on Act 4, Rebirth and Reprise by the Deer Hunter. I'll do Act 5, Confessions and the Devil and the Confessions, whatever it's called. I should know this by heart. I have the CD right here. But yeah, I need to organize these CDs. Here it is. That will be tomorrow. Hymns with the Devil in Confessional from 2016, which is the last sort of proper full-length album from the Deer Hunter. And then, the plan is I think I will cover the EP that came out after that. It was like a couple years after that. And then we'll do the ranking, so probably by the end of this week, probably Thursday or Friday, we'll do the big ranking video, and then I can move on to whatever I'm going to do next. King's X, whatever. There was something else. Oh, we found out about Dream the Electric Sleep today. They're gonna be releasing didn't damage that. They're gonna be releasing a new album, I guess, this year. They've been in hibernation like a lot of these bands and artists over the last few years and COVID and stuff, but it's good to see them back. There's some other stuff. Oh, I'm watching. I obviously finished Dead to Me. I didn't announce that I finished obviously The Expanse a couple weeks ago, but I want to watch Blake 7. But before I watch Blake 7, I got access to Logan's Run, the TV series from the 70s that was based on the movie that came out a few years before in the mid 70s. So, and I'm really liking it, even though it's dated. There's a little cheese factor to it. So when I finish it, I'm about halfway through. It's online. It's on Tubi. I know it's also on some other sites, like you can watch it on Amazon, but I think you have to pay. So, but yeah, Logan's Run. They might remake it someday. I should do some research on that. But it's good to find another TV series to catch onto. I mean, amongst Super Bowl and all this other stuff that's going on, and the TV season. Better Call Saul comes back in April, so I'll probably finish up that in the next week, and then do a review, and then look to start Blake 7. Hopefully I can do Blake 7 and a couple other shows before some of these other shows come back, but that's another quick announcement. But anyway, well, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.